views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Get ready for a game changer. Sarah Westall is bringing you Business Game Changers Radio. Mondays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sarah will bring you leading experts, visionaries, and newsmakers who provide the best commentary on big issues and cutting-edge innovations. Sarah's 20 years as a business executive will help you think like an entrepreneur with expertise, energy, and attitude. Now here's your host, Sarah Westall.
Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall, and you're listening to Conscious Business Radio on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. Did you know that 530,000 new businesses are created each month in the United States? That's according to the Kauffman Foundation. And unfortunately, 90% of them will end up failing, according to Forbes. So those are not very good statistics. Great statistics on the 530,000 per month, but the 90% makes it, a little daunting. But since so many start, and the numbers mean that 10% of so many means there are a lot of successful businesses that are starting around the country. And what I do is I teach a class at the University of Minnesota at the Carlson School in entrepreneurship. And I just love it. I work with these young kids, and their minds are so open, and they haven't been daunted and shut off by the world yet. And so they think that almost anything is possible. And it's so fun working with these kids. And as such, I am doing a show today on entrepreneurship, and I have some amazing people that I will be talking to today. But before I get into that, I want to talk about some stats about startups, which are pretty interesting. First, I have this study from the Founder Institute, and they looked at 15,000 business owners to find out what the keys of startup success is. And they found 4 common markers, and they think it's within 85% accuracy. So here's what they found after looking at 15,000 different people. They found that the average starting age of a successful entrepreneur is 40. So, no matter what people say that all these young kids are starting companies, and they are, and it's okay, it's good, but you can be older. So there are a lot of people in their 50s and 60s starting companies. For the age to be 40, you see a whole spread of people starting companies. Also, less than 1% of successful entrepreneurs come from extremely rich or extremely poor backgrounds, meaning they come from all walks of life. And 75.4% of successful entrepreneurs worked as employees at other companies for more than 6 years before launching their own businesses. So basically, having experience in large companies or other companies is pretty common. Well, here we go. According to Forbes, the keys to startup success is dependent upon these 4 common markers, and they're shared amongst moguls in all different business sectors. First, all of them, or not all of them, the majority of them have had professional experience, which matches to the 75.4% of successful entrepreneurs working at other companies for 6 years before launching their own companies. So they have professional experience. Number 2, they're creative, and they have positive thinking. So you have to stay positive when you're starting a company, because starting a company is very difficult. Number 3, they have fluid intelligence, meaning they're not just stuck in one way. They can look at different problems in different ways and see things in a fluid manner. And they're flexible, and they have agreeableness, meaning they're not just stuck in their ways, and they can handle people of different backgrounds and things. And then they looked at what the unsavory traits are that can damper your startup endeavors. And here's their number 1, excuse making. You can't make excuses for things. You just have to go and get it done. Predatory aggressiveness. So the a-hole that wants to just take over somebody's business, or they want to partner up just to take somebody over, those people tend not to be successful because people don't want to work with them in the long run. Deceitfulness, same thing with predatory aggressiveness. People do not want to work with deceitful people over time. Yeah, you might be a sucker once, but word gets around and it's just not good. Emotional instability. Things are tough when starting a company, so having emotional stability is very important. Narcissism. Same with deceitfulness and predatory aggressiveness. People don't like narcissists. They might be common in the corner offices of big companies, but when it comes to startups, other founders don't want to work with you, and narcissism tends to affect your ability to provide a quality product and service. So that's actually kind of good news that they aren't successful, I think. And here's some other things. According to the Kauffman Foundation, motivations for entrepreneurship, they say that these are the 4 most motivating factors, or the factors for, most motivating factors. Building wealth. People want to build wealth, which is obvious. People are looking for that startup culture. So people will go to a startup just because of the culture. Owning a company. People want to own companies. I suppose it's also tied to building wealth. Number 4, capitalizing on an original business idea. Somebody has some great idea and it's burning in their gut to go do this. And then here's some last facts about startups. 51.9% of successful entrepreneurs were the first in their families to launch a business. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is common in your business or in your family. And then 60.3% of successful entrepreneurs were driven to start their own business because standard work environments did not appeal to them. They just don't want to work in another company. The bureaucracy or whatever else, they want to do it themselves, and that's pretty common. But I am having a guy from Silicon Valley. His name is Richard Henley, and his company they place CEOs in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, but mostly in Silicon Valley, and they're one of the top-rated companies in that area placing CEOs there. And so I'm bringing him on to talk about what it is that people are looking for a Silicon Valley CEO, somebody that can run a startup. And these are professional executive placers. Venture capital companies come in, they fund these startups, and they want a top-notch CEO to run it. And these guys, Richard Henley and his company, come in and they find top-notch CEOs. Now, they're not always successful at it, but most of the time they are. And that's why they're one of the top companies in Silicon Valley. And so he's going to come and tell us a little bit about what it takes to be a CEO in Silicon Valley. But before I get into that, I'm going to talk about some notable companies that were started in Silicon Valley. It's really the hub, which isn't a surprise. People know that. But listen to some of these companies. It's kind of the who's who of high-tech companies. Google started there, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Apple, Tesla, Twitter, Facebook, Adobe Systems, eBay, Symantec, Cisco, LinkedIn, Netflix, even the Uber car companies started there. Oracle. But, okay, now if you're not in Silicon Valley, you don't have to fret too much. There are notable companies that have been founded outside of Silicon Valley. They maybe not have as much glitz and glamour with some of these, but they're huge companies. Microsoft, Amazon, Verizon, IBM, AT&T, Texas Instruments, CareerBuilder, National Instruments, Citrix Systems, Qualcomm, and Orbitz. Those companies are all started outside of Silicon Valley. So you don't have to necessarily be in Silicon Valley to have things going, but they do take the cake on having the most companies there. So if they're beating the rest of the country together, then that's a pretty good hub. But when you start looking at other industries like biotech, now still Silicon Valley takes a prize on that, but Boston, Massachusetts is not far behind. So there are other industries that are really catching up and closing that gap. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well with Richard Henley. And now I'm going to welcome him to the program. Hello, Rich. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing great. I know that you are an expert at finding CEOs, and especially for high-tech companies. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the economy is like in Silicon Valley, especially or specifically towards startups.
What is it like? I mean, is it still as strong as it always has been, or is the overall economy affecting it, or how is it going?
Well, I think that in the last 6 months, it's changed pretty drastically. Just because the investors who are investing in the Silicon Valley companies are much more conservative than they were 6 months ago. However, it really hasn't trickled down into how a lot of these early stage companies are hiring for one reason. Let's say a venture capital firm gave a company $20 million in December. Well, they still have that $20 million and they're still investing pretty heavily. I think what will change from a hiring perspective for a lot of these key executives is probably the third quarter of this year when they start to run out of that money and have to go back to the VCs and ask for additional funding then.
And is the overall economy, is it the recession that we're pretty much in right now that's affecting it? Or, I mean, what is going on?
I think that it's a couple of things. One is I think that with Apple and some of these really large companies not putting the positive numbers that they have had in 2015 and before, it's made a lot of investors pause as they think about investing in early stage companies. So they're just more conservative. So where they may have given one company $20 million last year, they may only give them $5 million this year.
And they're holding on to their money. They're just not investing. Is that what's going on?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of scary, isn't it? If you're a startup and that's all slowing down. Are you only focused on placing candidates in Silicon Valley or also across the country?
We do executive search all over the country. So we work with all the top VCs in around the world, and oftentimes many of these companies are in the Southeast or in the Northeast or on the West Coast. I would say about 60% of the work that we do is based here in Silicon Valley because that's where just the majority of the early stage companies are today.
And they're still there today. I mean, it's always been sort of that, but are you seeing a migration out of there to other areas or not?
Not really. We still see that's where everyone wants to come, is specifically as it relates to technology. Everyone believes that if they're in the Midwest or the Northeast or the Southeast, that's where the pot of gold is, because that's where, one, most of the VCs are, and two, most of the people from large companies such as Google and Facebook and Apple, where they leave to go start their own company.
So is it more an illusion, like the VCs think they're all there so that everybody goes there, and it's kind of that culture? They have a reputation of being there, so that's what everybody does. And if you're from another part of the area, another part of the country, it's just that much harder to get funding.
It is. I think that many of the VCs believe that the solar system all revolves around Palo Alto, and they, for some reason, just don't take a lot of these other companies outside of the area seriously as they do as one that they can go visit in Palo Alto.
Oh, that's interesting, even if they could be a lot better. So it's all perspective. So do you see a shortage for quality CEO candidates for high-tech companies?
There's always a shortage. The unemployment rate for a really good leader like that is 0.
Or negative?
Yeah. Because oftentimes these people are getting, 2 calls a week for the next opportunity. And everyone who's really good has a job.
So do you think that it's still that reputation thing? I mean, there are other types of people that probably could be really good. It's a stereotype type person everybody's looking for. The young male guy that's, is it pretty much a stereotypical placement?
I think that companies are just more and more conservative about what they're looking for today, and they're less willing to take a chance on somebody. So oftentimes when we're doing a CEO search for an early stage company, when we're talking to the board of directors for that company, they want someone who has been in their industry, has been a CEO, and has done exactly what they're trying to do at least 2 to 3 times in their career. So there's no doubt in their mind that this person will be successful because they've done it 3 or 4 times already. Well, if you think about it, that's just a handful of people all around the world that could actually do that.
Oh, yeah.
But
they have to self-fund at the beginning. You have to be successful a couple times on your own, and then suddenly everybody starts going after you.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you look for a different type of candidate for a CEO of a high-tech startup versus a larger, more established company? Do you see